All right, hi again. This is the video for the last couple of chapters that you had due for today. All right, let me just pull up the PowerPoint. All right, so this is the video for chapters 27 through 29. Just as a reminder, for Monday, you have chapters 30 and 31 to read. 30, 31. So 31 is a really, really, really important chapter. And so I'll ask you to read that one really carefully as you go through it, please. All right. So we're continuing with the Wilkes scheme. So once Huck figures out, right, that he's planning to make sure that the king and duke don't succeed, he steals the money that they've hidden in their mattress. A tick is a mattress. And unfortunately doesn't get a chance to do what he really wanted to do with the money, and ends up having to hide the gold in the coffin, which is really pretty funny. And then we get this ridiculous. Now remember, the time period, 1840. So, funerals were held in the home. The body was laid out and the wake was held in the home. But the description of the funeral and the undertaker, if you didn't chuckle a couple times with it, it is exactly like a TV sitcom, even from today. The fact that the singing is terrible, and Huck keeps saying that, the dead Peter is in the best position because he doesn't have to listen to it. Then a dog starts howling in the basement, and the undertaker has to sneak out of the room. And then you hear him in the basement banging and yelling. And then he comes up and he has to kind of whisper to the whole room that the dog had a rat. It's really very funny, and it plays out exactly like a TV sitcom skit. So a little bit of humor, dark humor, but humor nonetheless. And of course, we see right away, right, that as soon as the funeral is over, the king starts laying the groundwork for how they're going to get out of town. And they're going to auction off all the homes and furniture. And they say that they're going to take the girls with them to England. And what Twain's doing is building sympathy for the Wilkes girls, right? That they're going to be left penniless without parents. It was just, they're orphaned and they've lost their uncle, and now they're losing their fortune as well. And so it's just building sympathy the whole time. But amongst the humor and amongst the scheme, Twain is definitely questioning the morality of slavery. And it comes up multiple ways, right? So first, Huck's description of the separation of the slave families and his reaction to it is really important, right? He's clearly troubled by it. He's clearly horrified by the fact that this is going on, because Jim has shared with him the difficulty of being separated from his family members. And we had that moment where Huck says, I do believe he cared about his family as much as white people do. And so with that knowledge, with that experience now, Huck is seeing the situation differently. He knows what this is doing to the slave families. But he also recounts that the town is not happy with the king and the duke over the fact that they're separating this family, right? He points out on page 138, the thing made a big stir in the town too, and a good many come out flat-footed and said it was scandalous to separate the mother and the children that way. And it injured the frauds some. The frauds meaning the king and the duke. It injured them. But the old fool, the king, he bullied right along. And in spite of all the duke could say or do, I tell you, the duke was powerful uneasy. So the king and the duke are already fighting, right? The king is full on simply trying to get the most he possibly can out of this horrible situation. The Duke seems to have a little bit more reserve about it, right? He's a little more uneasy with what they're doing, and he thinks they should have gotten out of town already. But the fact is that the white townspeople have a problem with the separation of the family, and that is an important distinction, and to question the morality of slavery. And then, of course, Mary Jane is comes right out and tells Hook how she can't possibly be happy having been separated from the slaves that have been with her whole life. And because Twain has set Mary Jane up to be sympathetic, right? The reader has grown to like her and sympathize with her. It reinforces this idea that the separation of the slaves and selling the slaves off is barbaric, and Twain is definitely calling into question the morality of slavery through Mary Jane as well. All right. So we also have to consider that there is some important evidence of Huck's development in these chapters as well. So think way back to the opening chapters when Huck was talking about religion and heaven and hell, and when the widow told him that it was important for him to do things for other people. And that was a way that he would be a good person and get to heaven. And he did not take any stock in it. Remember, he didn't think that there was any point to helping other people because it didn't help him in any way. It only helped the other people. And he just didn't understand. Well, look how far he's come in his development. When we see that he's willing to help the Wilkes girls at his own personal risk and to cross the Duke and the King, he shows empathy. He's not doing it for any other reason than because he knows it's the right thing to do and because he feels bad for what's being done for them. He has matured and grown so much from those opening chapters. He's able to discern what the right thing to do is, right? He looks at the situation and he says, it's wrong that these girls are being treated this way. It's wrong what's being done to the slaves. It's wrong that these two con men are going to get away with this. And so he's willing to put a stop to it. That shows how much development he's had in terms of understanding right and wrong. And then, of course, the quick thinking and cleverness where he is under the gun and he's able to blame the slaves that were sold in haste. So they're already gone, so they can't get into trouble. He blames them, and it really then falls back onto the king because the Duke wanted to get away and get out of town, and the king wanted every last penny. And in his greed, it has now come back to bite him. And most importantly, it shows how quick thinking and clever Huck is, right? That he was able to come up with a way to get everybody kind of out of the situation safely, except for the king. Also, please make note that the king and the Duke are fighting more and more and more. So huge development for Huck in this situation. All right. So one of the questions asked you to consider chapter 28, what is special about Mary Jane and why is she the only person to whom Huck tells the truth? All right. Well, if you didn't pick up on it, you probably should have, right? Huck has a crush on Mary Ann. He thinks she's beautiful. He thinks she's kind. She is not someone whose appearance hides what's going on underneath. In fact, he tells her that her face is like a book and he can read everything on it, which is one of the reasons he says she can't confront the Duke and the King after she knows the truth. So he definitely has a crush on her. He admires her, but also she treats him with kindness. And that isn't something that often happens for Huck. And so, he makes the mistake at first of blurting out, right, that he knows information about the slaves that will make her feel better. And then, of course, he has no choice but to kind of come clean. On page 141, he talks about this kind of internal struggle he has about whether he should lie more or tell the truth, right? And he says, I reckon a body that ups and tells the truth when he is in a tight place is taking considerable many risks, though I ain't had no experience and can't say for certain. Right? He can't say for certain because he's not used to telling the truth, especially when he's in a bind, right? The survivalist realist in him says, I got to figure out something where I'm going to get out of this. And most of the time that's by lying. He continues, but it looks so to me anyways. And yet there's a case where I am blessed if I don't look to me like the truth is better and actually safer than a lie. I must lay it by in my mind and think it over some time or other. It's so kind of strange and unregular. I never seen nothing like it. Well, I says to myself at last, I'm going to chance it, and I'm up and tell the truth this time. And that it does seem like settling down on a keg of powder and touching it off just to see where you'll go to. All right, so he talks and he thinks it over and he says, you know what? I think the best thing to do is to just come clean to her. So, and that's what he does. He tells her the whole story. And of course, she rightly says, well, why can't we just confront the Duke and the King right now? And in another moment of growth and maturity on Huck's part, right? He is worried about Jim, and he comes out and he says, I'd be all right, but there'd be another person that you don't know about who'd be in big trouble. Well, we've got to save him, ain't we? That's Jim. He knows that if the Jim would be in big trouble, because who knows if the town would let Huck leave and Jim would be, stuck on the raft painted blue with this wanted poster, that he's a runaway slave, and it would do him in for sure. And so again, right, thinking about somebody other than himself, and that is huge in terms of his moral development. All right, so how does the scheme end? Well, just when you think, right, everything is kind of taken care of, Twain twists it a little more, and the real Wilkes brothers show up to town. Once again, we see the doctor as the leader and independent thinker, refusing to go along with the mob. Right? They're like, you don't talk to him, don't upset him, and he's, come on. I don't know if the two newcomers are the real Wilkes brothers, but what I do know is these two that have been here for days are absolutely not the Wilkes brothers. So, Twain adds a little drama and suspense in that. The one brother can't write because his arm is broken, and so they don't really have a good way to determine which is the right set of brothers. And so then, they ask what is on Peter's chest, and God love the king, he doesn't back down, but he says, there was an arrow on his chest, and the other brothers say, no, it's initials on his chest, and the only way that they can figure to find out for sure is that they're going to dig up the body and see if there are initials tattooed on his chest. So the whole town trucks on down to the graveyard to dig up the body. And of course, that also is the way that they're able to find the hidden money. So that works out. So in the rising storm, right, the emotions, again, are emphasized by the weather. Finally, the doctor lets go of Huck's hand in the excitement of opening the casket, and he is able to escape. And he runs, quickly till he finds a canoe. He's able to get in the canoe and find Jim on the raft, and they are reunited. And he says right at the end of the chapter, it did seem so good to be free again, and all by ourselves on the big river, and nobody to bother us. So he thinks they're free and clear. He thinks they're finally rid of the Duke and the King. He finally is happy to be just back with Jim on the river, where it's the two of them free to be themselves. When out of the darkness in a canoe come the King and the Duke, who have managed to escape. And the last line of the chapter, right, is the most telling. So I wilted right down on the planks then and give up. And it was all I could do to keep from crying. And the question says, what is bothering Huck? He just wants to be free of the King and the Duke. He's had enough. He's over them. He's over their despicable behaviors. His moral development has come to a point where he no longer wants to be associated with the two of them. And their return means that they have to deal with it a little while longer. And that really, really makes him upset. And so that's how chapter 29 ends. Okay, so once again, it's all about how much Huck has developed over the course of the story, and how much of that is because of Jim. That's what I want you to keep in mind. All right, everyone. So the only additional homework you have is to read chapters 30 and 31 and answer your questions. All right. Thank you all very much. I'm finishing up for third quarter grades. If you have any questions, I will be online today, tomorrow, and Friday. Feel free to email me. All right. Thank you, everyone.